You know how some moments freeze in your brain? Like someone pressed pause on your life and handed you a **T you didn't ask for. That's what that evening became for me. It was a Thursday, one of those crisp fall evenings where the sun dips early and the air smells like distant bonfires. I wasn't supposed to be done with work that early, but a client canceled last minute, and for once I didn't argue. I thought about heading home, maybe catching a game or ordering Thai, but then I remembered Lori had yoga. She'd been raving about it lately, some new hot flow instructor, new routines, and how she was finally finding her center again. That's what she said last week anyway, after disappearing for 4 hours on what she called yoga and recovery tea with the girls. So I figured I'd swing by, maybe surprise her, even offer to grab dinner afterward. Spontaneity, right? Only when I pulled into the studio's parking lot, it was a ghost town. Every slot was empty except mine. The building was dark. I got out anyway, confused, and walked to the glass doors. Taped on the inside was a sheet of printer paper. All evening classes canceled due to instructor illness. See you next week. Namaste. I stood there, staring at that paper like it was written in a foreign language. My first reaction wasn't suspicion, it was concern. Maybe she didn't get the message. Maybe she'd already left and just hadn't texted me yet. Then I remembered her stories. Lori was always posting. Nothing crazy, just those casual clips of wine glasses clinking, girls' night selfies, yoga mats, and smoothie bowls. I unlocked my phone and tapped her icon at the top of my feed. The most recent story was just 20 minutes old. The second it played, I felt my body go cold. She was at a restaurant. A place I recognized immediately, Bar Lumiere, a boutique wine spot on the edge of downtown. She wore that off-the-shoulder black sweater she usually reserved for our date nights, and her hair was done like she had somewhere to be. A glass of rose in her hand. She laughed softly, turning slightly toward the person across from her. The camera panned just enough. There was a man, maybe late 30s, neat beard, collared shirt, leaning toward her in that too familiar way. The kind of posture that doesn't scream coworker or friend from the studio. No, this was personal. The caption read, "Well-deserved unwind," with a clinking glass emoji. I stared at my screen. My thumb hovered over the replay button like maybe I'd missed something. Context. A clue. Anything that would make this okay. But there wasn't any. The yoga class was canceled. I was standing in the empty lot where she claimed to be while she sat across town sipping wine with a man she hadn't mentioned once. My stomach twisted, not with rage, not even jealousy, but with that subtle, sickening sense that something had shifted without me noticing. I drove home slowly, headlights washing over leaf-covered streets, my mind trying to assemble a version of the night that made sense. Maybe she ran into someone by accident. Maybe this guy was part of a group. Maybe she'd explain everything when she got in. I wanted to believe that. By the time she came through the door, it was just past 8 o'clock. She was glowing in that effortless way she always had when she'd had just enough wine to be giddy but not sloppy. She slipped off her boots at the door and called out, "Hey, babe. You're home early." She smelled like white wine and citrus, subtle, clean. Not the perfume she wore to work. This was different. New. I stayed on the couch, muted the game, and watched her float into the room like everything was perfectly normal. "How was yoga?" I asked, already knowing. "Oh, didn't you see?" she said too quickly. "Class was canceled. Something about the instructor being sick. Total bummer." I nodded slowly, keeping my voice level. "Where'd you end up going?" She blinked. After yoga got canceled. She hesitated for a second. Maybe half a second. But it was enough. "Oh, I just grabbed drinks with someone from work. Melissa. You know her, she's in marketing. It was kind of last minute. We were both already dressed and out, so..." Her voice trailed off, searching for the right level of nonchalance. "Which spot?" I asked, not giving her an out. She tucked her hair behind her ear, something she only does when she's nervous, and gave me that casual shrug she's practiced 100 times. "Bar Lumiere. It's mellow." We didn't stay long. I didn't say anything right away. I just watched her. Studied her. And she knew it. She crossed her arms lightly. "Why do you sound so suspicious, Clark? Is this one of those nights where you try to catch me doing something wrong because you're bored?" "I'm not trying to catch you doing anything," I said. "Really?" she scoffed, stepping toward the kitchen. "Because it kinda sounds like you are. God, it's like every time I go out without you, you get weird. It's exhausting." There it was, the pivot. I'd seen it before, but never aimed directly at me. She wasn't defending herself, she was accusing me of being controlling. That was her play. Make me the jealous husband. The overthinker. Paint herself as the poor woman just trying to enjoy a night out while her partner spun conspiracy theories at home. And the worst part? She did it smoothly. With ease. Like she'd done it before. Maybe not with me, but someone. I nodded again slowly. Okay. Okay, what? Nothing. Just okay. She paused in the doorway waiting for me to say something else. To argue. To accuse. But I didn't. I just picked up the remote and unmuted the TV. She lingered for a beat, then disappeared into the kitchen. On the surface, that night ended quietly. No fight. No slammed doors. No ultimatums. But internally, something had cracked open, and not in the way you repair. I didn't check her phone. I didn't ask her again. I didn't even tell her I'd seen the video. Because I already knew. And once you see the first lie dressed up as coincidence, it's impossible not to start looking at everything else. After that night, I didn't bring it up again. Not directly, at least. I didn't ask about the man across from her at the bar or whether Melissa from marketing had suddenly grown a beard. I didn't accuse or confront. But I started to pay attention closely. Because once the first lie slips through, you start seeing the rest for what they are, patterns. It began with her perfume. I remember when Lori first started wearing it. She had always preferred light floral scents, lilac, maybe a hint of vanilla. But sometime in late spring she switched to something muskier, almost spicy. She brushed it off when I noticed, said she was just trying something new. But she never wore it around me. It became her yoga scent, her girls' night scent, her I'm just running errands scent. I didn't question it at the time. But now I realized it was her other life scent. Then there was the phone. Lori had always been somewhat private but never secretive. She used to hand me her phone when she needed directions or wanted me to cue up a song. But that changed. She started keeping it on her at all times, even taking it into the bathroom with her. It lived screen down on the table and every notification was immediately swiped away the second it appeared. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. We all get more attached to our phones. Everyone scrolls in the bathroom now, right? But paranoia and pattern recognition are separated by one thing, evidence. One night, I woke up at around 2 a.m. to get a glass of water. On my way back to bed, I passed the office and noticed a soft glow under the door. I paused. Lori was inside, hunched over her phone, headphones in. Her eyes wide with whatever she was watching or whoever she was listening to. When I opened the door, she jumped and yanked the cord from her ears. Jesus, Clark. You scared me. What are you doing? I asked, pretending I didn't already know the answer. She fumbled, trying to turn off the screen. Couldn't sleep. Just watching a podcast video. In the office? I didn't want to wake you. I nodded and left it alone. But from that moment on, I started keeping quiet tabs, mental notes on when she left, when she got back, and the increasing number of times her stories didn't quite line up. Another thing I noticed was the gym. Lori had never been a gym rat. She liked yoga, Pilates, and occasional run when she felt inspired. But now she was suddenly dedicated. Hardcore. 3-hour sessions at odd hours. Full workout outfits left in the laundry with perfumes still clinging to the fabric. But no signs of actual sweat. No soreness. No gym selfies. No muscle fatigue. The changes didn't stop there. Her schedule tightened in ways that didn't make sense. Lori was a freelance brand consultant. Her work was flexible, sometimes unpredictable. But lately, she had it down to the hour. Her days were blocked out like clockwork, calls, meetings, coffee breaks, but they were always vague. No specific names. No clients I could verify. Once, when I asked who she was meeting for coffee, she said a new client. When I asked again the next day, just in passing, she gave me a different name. I didn't press her. I just watched. Over time, the way she looked at me changed too. It was subtle at first. Less eye contact. Fewer spontaneous touches. When we lay in bed, her body turned away. When I tried to pull her closer, she stiffened like my affection was an inconvenience. And she stopped asking about my day. Stopped laughing at my dumb jokes. Stopped sending those random mid-afternoon texts that once made me smile like an idiot. Even when we were in the same room, she felt far away, like she was dialing in from another life. But the real shift came in her storytelling, or lack of it. Lori used to share everything. Little things. She'd come home buzzing from a lunch and spend 20 minutes telling me how the server flirted with the woman at the next table or how a dog barked at her in the parking lot. But now? Silence. Or worse, contradiction. One Friday evening, I got home and asked how her day went. She said she was buried in emails and didn't leave the house. But her car had been moved. And when I checked the garage camera later, installed after a string of break-ins the year prior, it had captured her pulling out just before noon and not returning until close to 5. She never mentioned leaving. Another time, she said she had lunch with Rachel, an old college friend. But Rachel had tagged someone else in a lunch post at a totally different spot across town. A little thing, but enough. What started as isolated oddities began to form a pattern. A mosaic of microlies, contradictions, and gaps too wide to ignore. The kicker, though, the moment everything clicked was about a week after the yoga studio incident. I was in the laundry room sorting clothes when I found a crumpled receipt in the pocket of her running jacket. It was from a boutique liquor store halfway across the city. 2 bottles of wine, both the kind we never buy. Expensive. One red, one white. Purchased at 11:18 p.m. on a Wednesday night when she told me she was home watching Netflix. She never mentioned the wine. She never mentioned going out. I folded that receipt and placed it in my desk drawer without a word. Not because I planned to use it, but because I finally knew that this wasn't just me imagining things. People don't just change out of nowhere. Not like this. Not in slow, slippery pieces that fall off when they think you're not looking. I started thinking back further, months, maybe even a year. The weekend trip she took last fall to visit her sister, where she came back with no photos, no souvenirs, and no stories. The sudden interest in meditation retreats, only one of which she actually went to, and even then came home early, flustered, and silent. The night she cried after watching a movie, then brushed it off as just hormonal, even though she didn't remember what the movie was about when I asked later. So many things. Too many. It wasn't a single moment that broke my trust. It was death by 1,000 contradictions. Things that didn't line up. Energy that didn't match her words. Gaps she expected me not to notice. And for a long time I didn't. But now I did. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You stop giving benefit of the doubt. You stop rationalizing. You stop waiting for confessions that will never come. You start preparing. Because deep down, you already know the truth. Once you've convinced yourself you're being paranoid for long enough, you start to crave facts. Hard evidence. Proof you can hold, replay, rewind. Something that silences the constant question in your head, am I crazy, or is she lying? I needed that silence. A week after the wine bar lie, I did something I never imagined myself doing. I opened the smart home app connected to the security system I installed 3 years ago. Back then, it was meant to protect us, motion sensors, cameras, the works. Lori had stopped using it after a few months. Said it was too much surveillance, too invasive for a home. So I disabled the alerts, let it fade into the background. But I never shut it off. The front door camera was still active and the motion-activated living room camera still functioned when armed. I rarely touched them. But now? I needed clarity. Answers not filtered through tone or tears or carefully chosen words. Lori told me she was visiting her friend Harper that Thursday night. Harper lived in West Haven, about 40 minutes away. They were supposed to have dinner, catch up. Girl time, she called it. She even wore her thick gray cardigan, the one she always threw on when she wanted to look casual but layered. She kissed me on the cheek and promised not to be home too late. I nodded, smiled, didn't ask questions. But the moment she backed out of the driveway, I opened the app and armed the indoor camera. I don't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe guilt. Maybe her to actually go to Harper's and come home late with leftovers and laughs. Maybe I was hoping to be wrong. But I wasn't. At 8:42 p.m., the camera pinged. I waited until the next morning to watch the footage, alone in the office, coffee cold on my desk, the house still quiet. The video started with the sound of the front door unlocking. Lori stepped in, laughing softly, followed by a man. Tall, athletic build, jeans and a sweater, clean sneakers. He carried a small black bag in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. She closed the door behind him like she'd done it before. They walked into the kitchen side by side like they belonged together. Not a first date. Not nerves or distance. This was familiarity. Comfort. Routine. She poured 2 glasses without asking his preference. He took off his jacket and draped it over the back of a chair. They clinked glasses and leaned against the counter. Talking, smiling, laughing in that easy way you do when there's no pretending. At 9:06, she touched his wrist. A light, instinctive graze. At 9:12, they kissed. It wasn't clumsy or hesitant. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was casual. Expected. She led him out of frame toward the stairs. The rest was left to implication, but nothing about it felt vague. At 10:17, he came back into view, buttoning his shirt. She didn't follow him to the door. He let himself out, taking his bag but leaving the wine behind. She came downstairs 2 minutes later, glass in hand, and sat on the couch with her phone. Probably texting Harper, thanking her for the alibi. I watched the whole thing twice. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even move. I just sat there, staring at the paused frame of Lori sipping wine alone, the smile still fresh on her face, unaware or maybe unconcerned that she was being recorded. I saved the footage to an external drive, labeled it March 14th, and placed it inside a folder marked Insurance. It felt surreal. This was her home. The kitchen where we made pasta and argued over how much garlic was too much. The couch where we watched bad movies. The same hardwood floor we danced barefoot on when the power went out during a storm. All of it now rewired in my brain. That camera had caught something I already knew deep down but refused to admit. I never thought I'd be in this position gathering evidence against my own wife. But I also never thought she'd look me in the eye, smile, and lie with such precision. I had given her every chance to be honest. Not once. Not twice. Dozens of times. And each time she chose silence over truth. Somewhere in that video, my marriage ended. Not with a blowout fight or a slamming door, but in 1,000 quiet gestures, the way he stood close to her, how naturally her hand found his, the absence of guilt in her eyes. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't one night. This had rhythm, repetition, practice. That realization hit harder than anything else. Because I could have forgiven a lapse. A single moment of weakness. We all stumble. But this wasn't stumbling. This was orchestrated, choreographed, hidden in plain sight. When Lori returned the next morning, she brought home pastries and brewed my favorite coffee, Sumatra dark roast, extra bold. She acted like everything was normal. Like she hadn't just dismantled our life and repackaged it into someone else's evening. I played along. Did Harper ask about the house? I asked, keeping my tone light. She shook her head. Not really. She's dealing with a breakup, so it was more about her than anything else. You know how it is. I nodded, sipped my coffee, and watched her over the rim of the mug. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't flinch. Just flipped its screen down. She had perfected this. She had made a science out of deceit. And I had finally stopped guessing. I didn't ask who the man was. I didn't check her texts or track her location. I didn't need to. The camera gave me everything. I now had what I'd been seeking since the beginning, truth, pure and undeniable. Not filtered through guilt or denial. Not twisted into excuses or framed as misunderstandings. Just truth. Cold and unshakable. But strangely, once I had it, I didn't feel the way I expected. I wasn't angry. Not the chest-burning, punch-a-wall kind of anger I thought I'd feel. I wasn't even heartbroken, at least not in the dramatic, sobbing on the floor way they show in movies. I felt calm. Focused. Clear. She had made her choice again and again. And now I was going to make mine. I didn't confront her that morning. Or that night. I didn't yell or scream. I didn't ask for explanations she'd only twist into more lies. I didn't want closure from her. I didn't want anything from her. I simply decided I would give her the gift of silence. The same silence she gave me when she disappeared into other nights, other arms, other lives. I would mirror her indifference, her detachment, her ability to look at someone and see only what was convenient. And I'd start preparing for the day she'd come home and find nothing exactly where she left it. After watching that footage, I didn't sleep much. Not out of sadness or anger, but calculation. My emotions had burned out the moment Lori brought that stranger into our home. Now I was cold, clear, focused. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just hurt, it rewires you. You start thinking in terms of strategy, not sentiment. You stop seeking explanations and start designing exits. Quietly, carefully. That weekend, I told Lori I needed space to clear my head. She nodded like she understood, kissed my cheek, and went right back to her phone. Probably texting him. Or planning the next alibi. Either way, she didn't ask questions. She didn't even offer to come along. I packed a small duffel bag, loaded it into my truck, and drove 2 hours south to a trailer on a piece of land my grandmother left me years ago. 40 acres of overgrown pine and oak, plus a rusted-out Airstream parked beneath a half-collapsed tin awning. I hadn't been there in years. But now it felt like the safest place in the world. No neighbors. No cameras. No eyes. Just me, my thoughts, and the tools to start building something new. From that tin can refuge, I began quietly dismantling the life I had shared with Lori. The first step was financial. I logged into our joint accounts and reviewed everything, deposits, withdrawals, card activity. I wasn't looking for more evidence. I was laying the groundwork for separation. I opened new accounts under just my name and began redirecting all income, my paychecks, my dividends, every dollar I had coming in. I locked the accounts behind new passwords and two-factor authentication rerouted to a secure email she didn't know existed. Then I triggered the trust. Years ago, after a string of lawsuits in my field, I created a legal trust to protect our assets. It was dormant, more a precaution than a necessity, but still valid. And still under my full control. With a few signed documents and a call to my attorney, I activated it. Every asset in my name, house, car, investments, shifted silently into the trust. Not even Lori would see it coming. Next came the property records. The house had been a gift from my parents, and although we cohabitated, the deed had always been under my name alone, just with a loose verbal agreement about shared equity if we ever sold. There was never any paperwork reflecting that. The prenup, signed in 2016, made that crystal clear. Infidelity voided all claims to joint assets. At the time, she called it a formality. Now it was a fortress. I met with my attorney in person, laying everything out: footage, receipts, timelines. She said one thing: start now. Don't wait for her to confess. Don't give her time to prepare. And I didn't. I submitted the paperwork for a quiet filing, a preliminary divorce petition, not yet served. Just in motion. We draft, prepare, and deliver on my timeline, not hers. Meanwhile, I vanished. I pulled my car off the street and stored it in my cousin's barn outside town. No more commuting. No more being visible. I borrowed a friend's sedan for day trips when needed, paid everything in cash, and started forwarding calls to voicemail. Lori noticed eventually. It started with text messages. "Where are you today? Dinner tonight? Everything okay?" I answered politely. Kept it vague. Just need some time. Thinking about us. Taking space. She bought it for a while. Thought I was soul-searching. Believed she was still in control. But I had already rewritten the rules. At night, I reviewed the list: cancel joint subscriptions, close joint credit cards, transfer utilities. I disabled her access to my iCloud account, removed her from the shared calendar, revoked her access to the car app that tracked my location. Digitally, she stopped existing in my world. I stayed off social media. No posts. No stories. No trace. When I returned home midweek to grab more files from the office, I didn't ring the doorbell. I used the garage keypad, one of the few things she hadn't changed, and moved silently through the house while she was at a branding dinner, which I now knew was just a euphemism for whatever double life she'd chosen. I took the essentials: laptop, hard drives, tax folders, passport. I unplugged the router and swapped out the modem. Replaced the mailbox lock. Installed a new SIM in my phone. Then I drove away, leaving no footprint. Lori started to panic a few days later. I could tell from the tone of her messages. "Babe, you're scaring me. Can we talk? I feel like you're shutting me out. I'm sorry if I made you feel distant. Let's fix this." But I didn't answer. Silence is its own kind of message. One that can't be twisted or debated. She called my son, too, a 21-year-old from my first marriage who had always kept his distance from Lori. They never got along, not really. She tried to win him over, but he always sensed something. When she asked him to help get in touch with me, he texted me instead. "You want me to say anything back?" I told him no. She reached out to mutual friends next. Her narrative changed subtly. I was going through something. Maybe a midlife crisis. Maybe depression. She spun it well: concerned, supportive, confused. Some people bought it. Others didn't. I wasn't worried about perception. I was building a new life, not defending the old one. Behind the scenes, I moved swiftly. I found a small apartment downtown and paid 6 months up front. No forwarding address. Just a name on a lease and keys to a door she'd never open. I set up a P.O. box for all sensitive mail. I switched to a new payroll system at work so nothing touched our old bank. I even got a new accountant, someone who didn't know her name. Every detail mattered. Every thread had to be severed clean. Lori had no idea I'd been planning this for weeks. Maybe longer. She still thought I'd return. That we'd talk it through, get back to what we were. She didn't realize the man she betrayed was no longer playing by her rules. I stopped responding entirely. My attorney reached out next, served the papers through certified mail and email. Attached, a copy of the prenup, the timeline of separation, and a formal notice of asset protection procedures. There was no room for negotiation. I heard from her one more time that week. She left a voicemail. Her voice shook. There was no laughter, no righteous indignation, just fear. "Clark, I don't understand what's happening. Please call me. Please. We can fix this. I'll do anything." I played it twice, then deleted it. She had spent so long managing appearances, crafting stories, we *p***nizing in confusion. But now there was no one to perform for. No script to hide behind. She had underestimated me. She thought my silence was weakness. She didn't realize it was strategy. I wasn't disappearing. I was detaching. It started with a denied transaction. That Monday, Lori walked into a home improvement store, credit card in hand, renovation plans swirling in her head. She had big ideas for her yoga studio. New flooring, plants, diffusers, the whole aesthetic rebrand she'd been raving about to her followers. She had already posted about it too. Big changes coming. Hashtag studio refresh, hashtag energy shift, with a soft-lit photo of her standing barefoot on an empty mat, palms together in a pose that looked deeply reflective, curated serenity. But when she swiped her card at the register, it beeped. Declined. The clerk tried again. Still declined. Maybe try another card, he offered. She laughed it off, rummaged through her wallet, and handed him a second. Same result. Embarrassed, she stepped outside to call the bank. She thought it would be a simple mistake. A hold. A fraud flag. Something a quick explanation would fix. But the woman on the line was gentle and firm. Apologetic but clear. Your name is no longer listed as an authorized user on this account, ma'am. Lori froze. That's impossible. I've been on that account for years. There were recent updates to the ownership structure. I can't provide more details unless you're the primary account holder. I am his wife, she snapped. I have access. I'm sorry, the voice said again, still calm. I understand this is upsetting. Lori hung up without saying goodbye. From there, it unraveled quickly. She drove home, frustration simmering, only to find the internet down. Not glitchy, off. Router reset to factory settings. No Wi-Fi. No smart home control. She tried logging into our account to reboot things, but her credentials no longer worked. Password rejected. Recovery email unrecognized. She tried her laptop. Same result. Even the front door camera, the one she used to check for packages, refused to connect. The app showed a login failure. She stood on the front step, tapping her phone over and over, cursing softly under her breath. Then the screen flashed. Device no longer linked to this account. That night, a certified letter arrived. She found it in the mailbox after dark, wrapped in a red and white USPS slip. Inside was a packet, thick and neatly tabbed. Legal paper. Cold, formal language. At the top, my lawyer's letterhead. Below it, her name followed by respondent. She read every word, sitting at the kitchen table, still in her jacket. The lights hummed above her. Her wine glass, poured and forgotten, sat untouched. The filing included our 2016 prenuptial agreement, clear, airtight, and suddenly very real. She had signed it herself. Back then, she'd called it a silly document. A formality. Something my lawyer insisted on. She laughed about it at brunch with her friends, telling them she had nothing to hide. Nothing to worry about. She even joked, if I ever cheat, take everything. I'll deserve it. And now? Now it was happening. The agreement detailed what would happen in the event of infidelity, loss of claim to joint assets, forfeiture of spousal support, exclusion from business holdings. It was blunt. Clinical. Final. She read the highlighted clause 3 times. In the event of verifiable extramarital activity by the respondent, all community property claims shall be nullified effective immediately. Attached to it, the evidence. A printed copy of the security footage. Time-stamped. Annotated. Faces blurred but unmistakable. Next, a financial statement. Her name slowly disappearing from lines she used to consider ours. Credit cards revoked. Insurance policies split. Auto payments reassigned. She was no longer listed on the deed. The power account was in my name alone. The home alarm recognized only my phone. Even the shared Netflix kicked her out. Every system she had once logged into out of convenience was now sealed. By the time she reached the last page, her hands were shaking. She didn't cry, not right away. She was too stunned for that. The paper trembled in her fingers as she scanned the room like she was waking up in someone else's house. She didn't recognize the silence. Or maybe she didn't recognize herself inside it. Because in her mind, she had been in control. She had assumed, like many do, that infidelity was just a storm to weather, a mistake, a bump, a phase. That if she spun the narrative well enough, she'd still have a hand on the wheel. That guilt could be managed. That the story could be rewritten, softened, explained. She hadn't expected the terms to be enforceable. She hadn't expected me to disappear. And she definitely hadn't expected consequences. The next morning, she called my attorney. She left a voicemail. Her voice was cracked but still trying to sound composed. Hi, this is Lori Miller. I just received some documents that I believe may have been sent in error. I'd like to request a conversation regarding the property statements, specifically the account access and the divorce filing. I believe there's been a misunderstanding." She said misunderstanding, like she hadn't already betrayed me in high definition. My attorney never called her back. Instead, a follow-up letter arrived 2 days later with a list of designated contact channels. No phone calls, no informal discussions, just written communication, controlled, legal, monitored. That afternoon, she called my son again. He didn't answer. She messaged 2 of our friends, asking if they'd seen me. They hadn't. She posted a vague quote to Instagram. "Sometimes you don't know what you had until it's gone." A few liked it. A few unfollowed her. No one commented. That weekend, she showed up at my parents' house. They didn't let her in. The version of Lori they tolerated for years, polite, polished, performative, had finally lost its shine. My mother told her calmly through the screen door, "You've done enough." She left without saying a word. The studio renovation was put on hold. She posted less, smiled less. Her once curated life now showed cracks she couldn't filter away. She began sharing recycled content, old photos, inspirational quotes, **TS from better days. Anything to maintain the illusion. But those close enough saw the truth. Her inner circle began to drift, slowly at first, then completely. One day, she went to log into her studio's business bank account to finalize a supplier invoice. Locked out. Another notice. Access revoked. A week later, her accountant informed her that the EIN, registered under my holding company, had been legally transferred. She was no longer a stakeholder. The space she used to run, no longer hers. The name she built the brand under, protected by trademark. Even her digital assets, email, scheduling, booking platform, redirected to a new site. My site, because she had never read the fine print. She had assumed that charm would cover oversight, that apologies would erase strategy, that promises made during pillow talk were stronger than contracts signed at a lawyer's desk. But she was wrong. The collapse wasn't loud. It didn't come with slammed doors or screaming matches. No thrown dishes or packed suitcases. It was quiet, surgical, systematic, and that's what made it final. By the time Lori realized what had happened, it was already over. 2 weeks after the paperwork arrived, Lori decided to reclaim her story. She threw a party. Not a quiet dinner or a low-key gathering, but a full, curated event at the house she still pretended was hers. She sent out digital invites, lit candles in every corner, and filled the kitchen with tapas from a local caterer. Music drifted through the rooms, wine flowed freely, and her laughter rang out just loud enough to be overheard from the driveway. She wore a soft pink dress, effortlessly styled. To anyone who didn't know better, she looked radiant, free even. She told guests she and I were taking time apart, spinning vague stories of personal growth and space. She spoke in terms of healing and rebirth. But the illusion cracked when I walked in. She didn't see me at first. I entered through the side gate, moved through the crowd, and stopped just inside the archway of the living room. Conversations faltered, glasses lowered. A few people recognized me immediately. Others simply sensed the shift. And then she saw me. Her smile vanished mid-sentence. I didn't come alone. Standing beside me was Madison Hart, an attorney Lori had dismissed 5 years ago with a smug laugh and the words, "Too intense for me." Now, Madison wore a sleek suit and an expression of absolute composure. She held a single manila envelope. I didn't speak. I simply walked over, set the envelope on the dining table, and met Lori's eyes. Inside were the finalized divorce terms, signed, sealed, executed. Asset division, finalized property reassignment, trust documentation. It was all there. Lori's hand hovered above the envelope, trembling. "You can review it with your new counsel," Madison said calmly. "Everything's been filed. There's nothing left to dispute." I turned to leave. Silence followed me through the hallway. I didn't look back. Not at Lori. Not at the guests who stared wide-eyed and speechless. I stepped into the cool night air and felt something close to relief. Lori stood frozen, one hand on the back of a chair, the other gripping the edge of the table. The party around her unraveled. Conversations died. The music felt too loud. People began to whisper. A few slipped away quietly, coats clutched tight. She didn't move for a long time. The envelope sat unopened on the table, heavier than anything she'd ever held. A month later, it was all finalized. The house was sold. Her name never appeared in the closing records. The bank accounts were sealed. My son, acting as trustee, rerouted every dollar from the old inheritance into a locked fund for future grandchildren. Lori moved into a furnished rental on the east side, cheaper, darker, smaller. Her credit cards had been deactivated. Her yoga studio, stripped of branding, shuttered within weeks. Her once dedicated followers noticed the change. The posts slowed. The engagement dropped. Her life, once a glossy highlight reel, now flickered in quiet intervals of curated nostalgia. Unpaid bills stacked on the hallway table. Collection notices followed. She sent me messages at first, tentative, then pleading. Then nothing. She tried to contact my son again. He didn't respond. The silence grew. Her Instagram feed became a loop of indirect apologies, filtered sunsets, and old photos captioned with quotes about growth through pain. No one believed it. Not anymore. She had once stood in a room full of people, wineglass in hand, and called me the past. She truly believed she had one. Now she sat on a second-hand couch in an apartment she didn't own, surrounded by things she couldn't afford, staring at a phone that didn't ring. And maybe that's what betrayal ultimately does. It doesn't just end what you had. It subtracts the future you thought you were guaranteed. For Lori, the collapse wasn't sudden. It was gradual. And it was irreversible.